Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Visibility Era, the podcast. Today, we have a super special guest. We have our dear friend, Erica Muller. She is the host of an amazing podcast called Here for It. I actually pitched some of my personal clients to her last year, and that's how we kind of got connected through my clients. She saw one of their placements somewhere, so it was just really cool how we kind of connected, and we were definitely meant to connect because we have so much in common. But Erica is an actress and a podcast host. What I find really special about her show is that she creates a space for people to really get vulnerable and talk about things that are important within industries, career, wellness. And she has had some incredible guests on her show so far. She's had celebrity stylists, she's had Emmy-nominated directors, Netflix stars. So Erica, welcome to the show. We are so excited to dive into all the juicy things, all things podcasting.
Oh my gosh, what a sweet intro. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you guys.
Yay. So Erica, let's reel it back and talk about how you got into podcasting and also weave that into maybe your acting career. I think that's so cool that you have a background in that. I mean, you can tell that you are naturally very comfortable in front of a microphone.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's funny because they definitely go hand in hand. I was in the entertainment industry before getting into podcasting. And really, the reason I got into podcasting was because of the pandemic. The entire entertainment industry shut down completely. Nobody knew how long it was going to be like that, what was going on. And I think a lot of people took that time to kind of reevaluate and they were like, what is working in my life? What isn't? And I felt like it was time for me to have a space where I could be a little more forward facing. With acting, you're behind a character a lot, which I love dearly. But I just hadn't really had a chance to put myself out there and have conversations that I wanted to. And so I launched my podcast in 2020 before kind of before the end of the pandemic, really. It was still the thick of it. And I think a lot of the stuff that I've learned through acting is propelled into podcasting. The two worlds are very similar in a lot of ways. And so to me, they make a lot of sense that they go hand in hand.
It's always interesting to see people who are comfortable behind a camera or behind a microphone because it really does show, even listening to podcasts or even being interviewed or, interviewing someone, you can tell if they have that stage presence and they just have that comfort. So it sounds like for you, that was already a natural thing. So was it different when you started to interview people? Was that a whole different world for you?
For sure. I had never interviewed somebody before. I wasn't, a host of anything. And so that definitely took some practice. But I also really found it to be a really cool opportunity where, growing up, I loved watching E News and where they were interviewing celebrities and what are they doing? And but sometimes I felt like they weren't asking the questions that I really wanted to know. And so I was like, this is my opportunity to ask the questions that I feel like other people are overlooking. And so I really leaned into that. And I just had so much fun with that I think it made that learning curve not quite as big.
Oh, I love that. When you are interviewing people, now I want to know, what kind of questions are you asking them? I'm sure it's an intuitive process, but was there
Yeah.
anybody, I'm sure this happens often, but was there anybody where after the show they were like, I didn't think I was going to go there, but I did.
Oh, all the time. Um, I try to do as much research as I can on somebody beforehand because I respect people's time. I know they're taking time out of their day to sit down with me for an hour and to talk to my audience. And so I really respect that of people. And I don't want to waste their time in asking them questions that they've already been asked on another podcast or that it's ready available on their website. I just don't feel like there's value in that for them, for me, for an audience listener. And so I kind of just sift through and I'm like, where are their gaps? Where is something that I feel like I want from this person, but I haven't seen yet? And so that's what I do. And I often get wow, these were really great questions, or thank you for asking these. Nobody's ever asked me that before. And so that always makes me feel really good and I'm on the right path.
Yeah, definitely. I am that nerd that like, you know how some people when if they're like releasing a book or something, they'll do like a podcast tour and it's clear, like it's obvious, like they're going on, the top wellness shows and they're having the same conversation, but sometimes I personally want more. And I remember, what was his name? I'm going blank right now. Gabor. He's a, yeah,
Like a psychologist or something like that.
yeah, he's a
Gabor Mate. He went on every
yes,
single show, like Luke
every
Story, everyone.
Okay.
he was on Almost 30, he was on Expanded, he was on, yeah, Luke's Story. Anyways, he went down every single wellness show possible. He had a very robust podcast tour, but I like really, really wanted to know more. So I kept listening to every single one of the podcasts, and he was on Joe Rogan's and however you think about Joe Rogan, he can be very controversial, but I do appreciate that he will sit there and ask the questions that aren't typically asked. And he'll sit there for 3 hours with some of his guests. I mean, that's like his format. But
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, that's a great use of my time because I know I'm going to get a good interview out of it,
Yeah.
you know?
Something you haven't already heard.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate that. Um, and I wanted to ask you, like, just podcasting questions. Bridget and I released Visibility Era almost a year ago at this point, which is really wild. I keep thinking it's been like 3 months. I'm like, oh, we've been doing this for like 5 minutes.
I think
It's
it
been
was June.
June, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
What is time?
What
what?
is time? Where are we?
Like, where did the time go? But what would be your recommendations for somebody starting a show maybe tomorrow? Like, what would you tell them would help them in terms of getting their listens up or reviews or like whatever the stats are, and also just creating a show that feels good to them?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think having a really clear why and knowing who you're talking to, I think it's very easy to want to start a podcast and just not have thought through like a format and what is the branding like. Like it's so much more than just audio that somebody's listening to. It's what is the vibe? How does somebody feel after they listen? Are they inspired? Do they want to use it as a time to escape and laugh, or do they want to learn something? Like you have to get really, really clear on things because audiences are so smart. And I think that's something that is so underrated is that people know in an instant whether like it's fake, whether it's in alignment, whether it's for money, whether it's which like we all need to make money, like there's that factor, of course, but like you can tell when somebody's authentically sharing something because it feels true to them. They actually care about what they're speaking versus just putting out content to put out content. In this day and age, there is so much content available. The barrier to entry is pretty low. And so anybody and everybody can really access the internet or podcasting. And so just being mindful of not adding noise to noise and really like using your voice, I think is going to get you really far.
It is totally like a business thing to have a podcast, right? We know that it's going to make us more searchable on Google because these are such highly trafficked sites like Apple and Spotify and Castbox and whatever. But I really appreciate you saying that there should be some forethought. Like when Lydia and I were starting the show, we were like, what matters to us? First, we like have to have fun. Like if we're not giggling on this show at least twice during an episode, we have not succeeded. And also, who is our audience? Like, what do they want to know, right? These are business owners who might be thinking about starting a podcast, or they want to get more visible, or they're curious about how the media works. And we have to be mindful. We are literally producing shows here. Like when we are getting and accepting these applications from people who are thinking about being on the show, we have to think about, would this be of value to our people? Does this match the vibe, like you said, of the show? Like, what are people going to leave this episode feeling? And I feel like what you just said is not always part of like the podcasting conversation. So how did that come to be for you? Like, did you just know that intuitively, or did you see a lot of shows where they were just producing content, content, content?
That's a really good question too. I think it comes down, there's like a few things that I can think of. One, I think part of it is the way that I just like to consume media and how I use social media platforms, and I can get very overwhelmed very quickly. And when a lot of the stuff you're seeing is like very repetitive, I get very overwhelmed. And the second part is that I feel like I've always at my core kind of just been my own person. I really have always kind of just stayed in my own lane. I know what's for me and I know what's not. And for me, that makes it really easy to be like, I know what I want. Maybe nobody else has done it, and that's fine because I want to do it my way. Or maybe it is sort of similar in some other ways. But at the end of the day, like, again, you have to just lean into who you are. And like, does this feel like it's for me? If so, I would go down that path. If not, reevaluate. Um, I really trust my intuition. I listen to it all day long, and it's never steered me wrong.
I'm also glad that this is part of the conversation, like the intuition piece, because there are so many marketing strategies out there, visibility strategies. Like we've interviewed many of these people who are promoting these things, but I do think that this is the other side of that equation. Like, does it feel right in our body? Is it actually an FES, or are we just compromising our values to get somewhere where we think we should be? So even as like a kid, were you very intuitive? Like I just have a sense that we're always very emotionally connected and felt.
Oh, 100%. I am like a true Scorpio to my core. And so I really have always been this way. And so for me, it's just like come second nature, but I understand how it's not that way for other people. And you might need to like learn how to get into your body more and like out of your mind. Um, like I said before, I just have always known that is for me, that is not. I don't spend a lot of time in the gray area. I visit, but I pretty quickly can be like, nope, or yep.
Do you know what do you know human design?
I I do, but I don't like listen to it. Like I don't
Yeah.
like actively follow it.
I've been like diving into, I don't, I do not know much. I'm not a expert by any means, but there is a decision making that all of us have. So I'm an emotional, actually, Bridget and I are both emotional
Emotional
authorities.
authority. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need to like sit on things for 24 hours because the two of us can
Mm.
get very influenced by lots of different things, by our minds, by somebody else. Like sometimes if someone else is really excited about a decision, I realize that I get hyped as fuck over it. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, this is amazing. We should do this, blah, blah, blah. And then like a day later, I'm like, wait, that wasn't me. That was them. And I actually don't want to do this. So I'm curious to know, like, I feel like yours is probably
Sacral.
sacral, yeah, which is like a full body yes or no, because you mentioned like my body, which was interesting.
So I have my human design chart, but I have no idea what it says. I can look it up after and I'll tell you.
We'll put it in
Yeah,
the
we
show
need to
notes,
know.
everyone.
Yeah.
Here's a
But
link to her chart.
to my specific, if you guys really want to know. Um, but yeah, I don't go to other people for like, should I do this? Should I not? Like I know for myself.
I love this. This is so amazing. Very inspiring. And I feel like just a good reminder because in a world of noise, we need discernment. And I think that's discernment and intuition are probably two of our greatest senses that aren't always highlighted as humans.
I agree. And I think it's so underrated. The second I start feeling like anxious or overwhelmed or like, oh my gosh, like, do I need to switch something? I'm like, oh, how much time have you spent on your phone? Are you on your computer? Have you just been in emails all day? Shut it off. Why? Like, I thrive in silence. Like, if I could just sit in silence for 24 hours, I would be like so happy every week. Like, if I had one day a week for just silence, I just like reconnect that way and like recharge.
Mm, so nourishing. Yeah, I can see that for you.
Yeah.
I know that Lydia and I are very curious about some of like you to us are just very well seasoned in the podcasting world, not only with your own show, but being a guest on others and just knowing the podcasting world really well. And one thing that we really admire about your show is how you've been able to get some of these incredible guests on your show, like, Emmy nominated producers and people that are very admirable in the public eye. So were those conversations or relationships you already had? Were those just like invitations that you had and you're like, hey, come on the show? Like, how did that conversation go for you?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of both. There's some relationships I had, and some were completely new, and I just reached out. And I think in going back to like, and I think authenticity is kind of like this buzzword that gets thrown out. So I like hesitate to use it. But when you can like authentically convey who you are, what the point of your show is, how this person is a good fit, who your audience is, I think it's easy to have a dialogue of like, yeah, come on, and people are generally really excited about it.
Yeah, I think authenticity is so important. And even coming from, the visibility space and pitching, we talk about this a lot with our clients, just like what makes you unique, what feels good to you, what are your authentic, core values, because those are the things that are going to set you apart in a very saturated market. I loved that you were talking about like all the noise and how to stand out from the noise because there is so much content, which has a double-edged sword. It's amazing because there's lots of opportunity for people to get featured and like meet people and like it's great for that. But the other side of that is like, are we adding value to this? Or are we adding just additional distractions? So can you tell us like what are the value points that you think are just like really important to have in a show? I'm sure there's like some sort of hidden formula. Maybe you thought about it, maybe you didn't, but maybe just like some of the meat and potatoes that you could share with our audience today.
Yeah, I think one big one that comes to mind is you mentioned like how to stand out. And I think your goal can't be to stand out because then it feels performative as opposed to like what again is aligned, what works, what is something sustainable for me, because sustainability is a really big deal when it comes to podcasting. Most people don't understand how much time and energy goes into one single episode. And especially if you don't have like a big team behind you, which a lot of people don't, it's more than a full-time job. And so I think if your goal is just to stand out, um, I think people will feel that. And so I think again, the value of like, who are you? Who is Lydia? Who is Bridget? Like that is always what is going to make your show successful because people want to connect and relate with you. I think the reason podcasting has become such a big platform is because hosts often feel like somebody's BFF. Like you don't always know what a listener is going through. And having somebody consistent in their life who's like sharing and maybe going through similar things or is into similar interests can have a much larger impact than you would ever believe. And so if you're trying to perform to get an audience, I don't think that audience is going to be there for you.
I love that. You guys, you and your friend Emily connected us with Elevation Nation.
Yeah.
They are
We
amazing.
we
Obsessed
are
with them.
obsessed with them. We like tried to reel it in. We're like, we love you guys. It's fine. Send us merch. We'll wear like your sweatshirts when we interview on your show. We're not even kidding.
We're doing it.
Yeah, they were like, oh, we'll send you guys merch. We're like, we're gonna show up like nerds, like having the hat on and stuff. But what we thought was really interesting when we interviewed them, and that episode will come out soon. They shared such a good point. They said that the hosts are, if you like a show, you're listening to that show doing the most intimate things in your day. Like you're going to be listening to them while you're washing the dishes, or you're taking a few moments for yourself to go on a walk and you have them in your ear, or you're like making your bed. And so I never really thought of it that way. That the reason why we love these people so much and we get to know them is because, yeah, we're listening to them consistently. We love it. But like we're also inviting them into our world too. That blew my mind. I don't know. It just blew my mind. I loved it.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, podcasting, you can multitask so easily. Are you in the car? Are you cleaning the house?
Mhm.
I think that's very, very true.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think back to my first podcast ever. It was me and my friend Jen, who is a wedding photographer. And this is like before she even had that business. And we called it Unbound. We had numerous names, as one does for like the start of the podcast. And we would just talk about everything that lit us up. We'd talk about things going on in our life. We'd talk about death. We talked about sex. We talked about like body hair. We talked about everything that was just like true to our personalities. And I never looked at the stats. And we looked back at the numbers. I've had numerous business podcasts. That podcast had the most downloads of any podcast I've ever had, and we never tried one. We didn't even know that people were listening, and there was a lot of people listening.
I was a fan and we did not know each other. Like Bridget, I would listen. For anyone who doesn't know, Bridget and I met in a manifestation Facebook group. That's literally how we met. And then we turned into business partners years later. And now all we do is talk about like business and PR. But it's just really funny because we even have a background in like just being relatable. Like we both really love wellness. And so I love this conversation about authenticity. I think it's so real. So, Erica, you mentioned that you need some alone time for yourself, which I can totally relate to. I feel like I'm the, what is it, extroverted introvert or whatever,
Yeah.
where I can be so extroverted. And then the second I get home, I'm like, never let me go
Yeah.
back. Never let me go back. But what do you do throughout your day and your week to stay balanced? Because you're talking to a lot of people on your podcast. Also, being an actress is a lot. Like you're absorbing other personalities and you have to play different roles. So, like, what do you do for you?
Oh gosh, this is a good question. My favorite thing ever is to go for walks, like in silence. Like don't listen to a podcast, don't listen to music, listen to the birds, hear kids laughing when you walk past a playground. Like be in the world around you, be in your body, feel the sun on your skin. That rejuvenates me. Like I can't even tell you. I feel like I could sometimes walk for like 29 miles and be like, this is the best. Um, so that is like my go-to if the weather's nice. I try to be outside as much as possible. Um, I love just like having a moment where I can make like a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and just like sit. And there's something to me about like a warm drink that is like comforting and cozy. And I just feel like that kind of helps bring me back into my body. I find a lot of times when I am feeling overwhelmed, it is because my energy has been like scattered. It's been dealt with like so many other people, or I've been out in the world, or just really, really social. And it's like I need to like collectively bring myself back inward. Um, which I know that sounds kind of crazy, but like it's this feeling of like being in your body as opposed to like up here in your head. And so anything that like gives me a chance to just be in the present moment. I love watching the sunset at night. I have like a window that has like the perfect view of the sunset. And so when it's not cloudy, I sit intentionally, I put my phone away, I just like watch the sunset. It's just like small moments that you can be like, oh, I have 20 minutes before my next meeting or whatever. What can I do right now? Can I look out the window? Can I um, do a walk around the block? Can I just lay on the floor in the sunbeam and like charge myself? Yeah, it's all those things. That was a long answer. I'm
No,
sorry.
those were
No, no,
great.
no. I loved that. I was like, and Erica's also a cat. I feel like cats loved.
I
Cats love to
jokingly
like tell
tell
her.
everybody, I jokingly tell everybody that in a past life I was a lizard because I find the sun. Like where the sun is where I want to be.
Girl, you got to come down to Florida. There's so much
I was just
sun.
there.
Wait, where?
I was in Fort Lauderdale. I went for a friend's bachelorette.
Were you seriously? You know, I'm very close to Fort Lauderdale.
Really?
I'm like
Lydia's like, I
25
couldn't
minutes.
capture you. Crap.
You know,
Wait,
it's those
was it Fort
bachelorettes.
Lauderdale? It's like Tampa area, right? Is that?
Oh, no, no,
Oh, other
no.
Oh,
side.
Yeah,
what is
Tampa's on
that?
the other side. Fort Lauderdale's near like in between Miami and West Palm.
Oh, maybe it was Fort Myers or
There.
St. Pete.
Oh, Fort Myers.
See, I don't know Florida, you guys.
No,
It's for
we need to
like, she
do
was like,
Florida geography. It is huge. Who
it's
knew?
huge. Were you on the West Coast or the East Coast?
West.
Okay, you
Mhm.
were not near me at
Okay,
all.
okay.
But I can wave across the way.
Yeah.
Well, Bridget was just down here too, but she was on the West Coast, and I was like, I love you. Have fun over there.
Like waving. I love that. We always like brand position New Jersey, but maybe we should like brand position Florida because we also love Florida.
Yeah.
Erica, but what you were saying, it made me curious like what your day actually looks like with being able to take those moments of like enjoying the sunset and like making a nice cup of tea versus like how much time are you spending, behind the mic or castings and auditions versus all the time for you.
This is such a hard question to answer because every day is different. Some days are like 6 auditions and a interview. Some days there's like nothing on the schedule. And then it's like a lot of like admin computer work. There's there's no typical schedule. And so it's great. But like, as with anything in life, I feel like things come in waves, and I don't know if you guys experience that too, but sometimes I'll be like, oh, like it's been chill. And then the next few days are like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my mind, like it's really hard. And I think that's why having like those little moments are so important to me, because when I do have a day that's like, I'm talking to people from 9 in the morning until 5 p.m., like consistently, I have to be able to regroup myself, because I feel like I'm jumping in and out of other people's energy all day. And to go from one energy to the next, to the next, to the next is pretty overwhelming. And so having little tools to get me through really busy days is great, but I also still use them on days where I have more free time, or like I can go on a really long walk. Um, that way there's always like something filling up my personal cup every day.
I love that so much. I think it's so important for anybody to remember that, like, yeah, we can be workhorses if we want to, but we also need to really be able to spend some time with ourselves. I know what you mean about like jumping around into other people's energies. Like, I have a lot of people coming to visit the next few weeks because, it's winter and Florida's
Yeah.
warm right now. So everybody wants to come visit me. And I've been stacking all of my calls, and like Wednesday night, I was literally buzzing. I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. I am unwell. I have been up here all day talking to other people. So I really appreciate this conversation because I don't think a lot of people talk about it that much. So speaking of, do you have this might have changed, but do you have any parameters around like when you do interview people for podcasts, and like what suggestions can you make for somebody who might be starting this on their own and they don't have a team? Like what maybe even like tech can they use too to help?
What do you mean by parameters?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, did I explain this appropriately? What I mean is like, when do you interview people? Do you like if they only say that they're available on the weekends and you don't interview on the weekends, do you allow that to happen, or do you say no? Like, I only interview on these days.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I just wanted to make sure I'm giving you the answer that you
Yeah,
asked the
no,
question about.
perfect.
Um, yeah, I mean, I do my best, but I understand everybody has different schedules, and I have to be flexible with that to an extent. I'm somebody who, like, I'm not opposed to working on a Saturday. Like, I've done it many times in my life. And if it's somebody I really want to talk to, I'm happy to. I'm trying to think, like, there haven't been that many that I've had to do on a weekend. Most people are generally pretty flexible and can find time during the week. Um, but once in a while you do have to be like, oh, you can't meet for 3 months. Great. Like, let's put it on the books, and like, I'll see you in 3 months. So you just have to know, you might have to be patient with people. Because you're asking them to step into your world, and it can be a big ask for people. So I just am always like as respectful of other people's time as I can be. Um, what was the second part of that question? I'm so sorry.
No, no problem. That was so
Oh,
good. I
tech.
think, yeah, tech stuff. But that was really good because even me being a publicist and like having clients, there have been times where I've had clients be like, why is this taking so long? And they want to see results right away. And I do a lot of podcast pitching, and we talk about it within Visibility on Purpose, and our course pitch party has a lot of podcasting because it's amazing for your visibility. You can borrow audiences, it moves the needle for sales, and like it's a really great place to be. But this type of stuff, like podcasting, does take time, and sometimes people can't, get on this schedule until 3 months in. So I really appreciate you sharing that from your perspective, but also from a media perspective as well, and pitching as a strategy. And then, yes, the tech. So what kind of tech do you use for your podcast? What would you recommend for somebody starting out? Like Bridget and I, we kind of started at grassroots, but now we're like, we just bought a new microphone. I'm not using mine now, but Bridget is using hers. So she probably sounds super crisp. Mine will be coming here soon. But I'd love to hear about all the tech.
Sure. Can I say one thing before the tech that you
Yeah.
reminded me of? in like being patient with people, having them as guests, you also have to be patient with your audience because different times of the year, people are like their schedule's not always going to be the same. In the summer, people travel. They're not in like a typical routine. So they might not be listening as consistently. Holidays, people travel all the time over the holidays. That's another time where like you might see numbers fluctuating. And it's like you just have to be patient with people and know like everybody's in a different season right now and just trust that like if you see a dip in numbers or if you see a spike in numbers, like it all evens out and just being patient, not being like, oh, the content I'm doing isn't great. Like that guest wasn't good enough. It's not that. It's like you have to be patient with people because they're, stepping into your world again and they need to do it on their own time frame. So that's my other little like soapbox moment about like being patient with people. But to answer your question,
That was such a mic drop.
I just think people get when they start a podcast, like the numbers is such like a mind game for a lot of people. And so, Bridget, what you're saying when you guys like weren't even looking at numbers, like that's pretty incredible. Most people aren't like that. And you just can't like let your life be dictated by a number. Like it just is an awful way to live. Um, but so anyways, to answer your question about tech, this is tricky because everybody also has like their preferences. Also, there's a really wide range. Like it depends on somebody's budget. Like you can go out and spend money on a really, really expensive mic, but you also like don't need it. Like if your mic is recording and at least like the quality is clear, you're not hearing like crackling, it's not picking up like crazy background noise, you're going to be fine. You can find like decent mics for around $100. You don't need like the $600 mic. If you want to and like that feels good to you, you absolutely can. But before you like know that this is like what you want to do, I would say like you don't need to put like don't invest in that. That's not really what's important yet. There's a stat out there that says um it's like only wait, what is the stat? It's like less than 10 wait, sorry.
We'll write it in the comments. We'll write it in the show notes. We'll get this one.
I'm like in my brain I'm getting the numbers mixed up. It's it's like less than 90% or no, more than 90% of people who start a podcast don't make it past 10 episodes.
I have
I
heard that.
have
Like
heard
they
that.
don't go. They don't keep
Yeah,
going.
Yeah.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
like don't spend $600 if you're not going to make it past 10 episodes, it's just
But
like the quality of your show, like focus on the foundation of your show. Do you have segments? Do you have guests? If you do, how are you asking guest questions? Do you have things within a show that you repeat every time? Like a lot of people do like rapid fire questions, like have a format that you can like get an audience used to where they like know to expect like, oh, they're going to ask this audience or this guest like certain questions and it'll be fun and interesting for them. That stuff is so much more important than the tech. But just a good quality mic, again, don't have to spend a ton of money and just make sure you're wearing like AirPods or headphones or something so that the mic's not picking up feedback. Use Zoom. There's other sites out there. There's one called Riverside, Zencaster, one called Descript. Just do some research. There's so much more information out there about podcasting now than when I started. And so like use Google. It should
yeah,
be your best friend.
Google should be your best friend. Google is definitely my best friend. So
At
I love
least,
this.
top three.
Yeah.
Top three. I love what you said about like what actually is important because it is so true. I think if you're thinking about starting a show, coming back to what you said, your why is so important because if you're not connected to your why, you're probably not going to make it past those 10 episodes. And I loved our conversation about being patient just in general and being patient with ourselves. Like you might not be amazing when you start or like in your definition of what amazing is, but like, I don't know, me and Bridget, like we've evolved so much. I feel so much more comfortable talking on our show than I did when we first started. So, Erica, like, how has your show evolved since you started it? Because it's been a few years now.
Yeah, it has been a few years. That's a good question too. I think, hmm, that's a really good question. I think it's evolved in the sense of I have more communication with audience members. And so hearing people's feedback about what they enjoy, honestly, is usually surprising to me. People pull out things that I would never have thought would like have stuck out to somebody. And so that like being able to listen and talk to an audience member is like invaluable because they're the ones who are like listening consistently. They're sharing with their friends, with their coworkers, um, and like they will champion you. And so like making sure they feel seen and heard is just like really important. And so I think as time has gone on, I kind of I still do things for me, but I also know how to do it in a way that feels good to somebody listening. Where in the beginning, I think it was a lot more trial and error of like, do people want like an hour and a half podcast? Do they want like a 20-minute podcast episode? And you just have to get through that. Like it's part of the process. And that is a point where like looking at numbers sometimes is helpful because you can see like, are people resonating with topics like this more than that? And that can kind of help steer you, especially if you're kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall in the beginning, where you're like, I'm interested in all of these things. Let's see what other people gravitate towards, and I can go down one of these avenues with them. So don't discount like the trial and error in the beginning because it's so valuable.
I especially love that kind of feedback, like when people are telling you, whether it's through the numbers or actually personally saying, like, I really loved this. For me, that always like sparks something in me and says, okay, like I love that too. That means more, please, more, please. And I'm curious as, you go on and you continue to record episodes, like where do you see the show going, especially as we start to close out this conversation? Where do you dream it to go or feel it's going?
My goal is just that I hope that it's made an impact in somebody's life. Like whether it's a funny comment that somebody makes or it's something that somebody wants to add to their routine, like watching the sunset every day. Like I think people are so quick to discount like little small moments, but they can make such an impact in your life. And so I don't think the goal has to be like, I need to be the next Call Her Daddy. Like, I think it can just be like, I hope somebody listened and felt seen or valued or like relatable or inspired in some way. And to me, that's like the biggest win anybody could ask for.
Yeah, gosh, I love that. And that's what we're all here for, right? Like, hopefully, everybody who's listening here, that's our community. It's about the impact at the end of the day. So, thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, 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 yes to all of that. So, Erica, where can we find you? Where does your show stream? If they want to connect with you, what is the best place to do that?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Erica Muller with two R's at the end. Maybe you guys could link it so it's easy.
Yeah,
And then my show is anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's on Apple, Spotify, and it's just called Here for It.
I love it. We're freaking here for it.
I'm here for you guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another amazing episode of Visibility Era, the podcast.